We are in Boston today to meet Quaime Lee. Quaime Lee is my friend who is currently the Associate Dean at the Northeastern Law School. And we had a brief conversation talking, because I was really curious about how AI is going to impact fields like law. And he also had thoughts about it. So I said, let's get together and talk about it. So I hope you enjoy today's podcast. It is very cold and windy. I'm thankful for these mics so you can hear us. All right, enjoy the episode. I know that guy over there. Happy New Year.
Welcome to Northeastern.
All right, here we go. All right, here we are.
Welcome to Northeastern.
It's actually, I feel like I've driven a long time ago when I used to live here. I drove past it, but I never actually visited. So, what are we gonna see, Quaime?
So I'm going to take you to a couple buildings around campus, give you a little bit of a walking history of the school, and along the way maybe talk a little bit about our identity as an institution, some thoughts about how things are evolving in academia relative to AI, technology, the job market, politics, and how we see ourselves fitting into that.
Let's do it. And we can also talk about you.
Oh, sure. That sounds good. So, welcome to Northeastern.
Yes.
We pride ourselves in being the first, well, we're technically not the first co-op school in America, but we are among the oldest, and this year we celebrated 115 years of co-op.
Wow.
Which is our signature program, which allows students to gain work experience while pursuing, whether it's their undergraduate degree or master's or professional degree. I work over at the law school, so we do co-op as well. And even though each school has its own flavor of what co-op is, at the core of it is a really intentional experience where you spend an entire, however long it is, whether it's 4 months or 6 months, you're working full time with an employer just as any other employee. You shut down essentially from school and function like a real grown-up with the opportunity to not just gain some important skills and experience and develop your professional relationships, but really understand the culture of the industry you're looking to pursue and try and test your assumptions, as we like to say. Try to figure out, I thought I wanted to be an electrical engineer, and then I started doing it. I'm like, I don't know. I thought I was going to be a prosecutor, but now I realize, no, I want to be a defense lawyer. And co-op gives you that opportunity to do that. And then when you come back to school, you can take some of the things you learned out in the real world and see how they apply back in the academic environment. And that's what we do here. Northeastern actually has an interesting history. I'm going to take us in front of the YMCA of all places, and you're probably wondering why, because they founded us.
Really?
The YMCA they decided to launch a night school. I believe the law school was the first of the schools back in 1898 that would eventually become Northeastern University. We're no longer connected to them formally, but we still maintain sort of a historic relationship. And their headquarters is right here on campus. And at the core of their founding, it was giving young men who probably didn't have the resources to go to the Harvards and other schools a chance at bettering their lives by getting additional academic training beyond what you might have gotten in secondary school. And over the course of the last 120 odd years has grown into what is now a 13 campus university in 3 countries.
Wow.
US, England, and Missing one. Canada. We have 2 campuses in Canada now, and probably continuing to grow. And yeah, it's been a big part of who we are. We've been always here, as far as I know, right on this strip. Believe it or not, one of the first World Series was played right on our campus.
No kidding.
Yes. The old, what were the precursors to the Boston Red Sox. I can even take you a little bit over to where that site is. You can see where the pitch was thrown by the great Cy Young, for whom the MVP of Pitching Award in baseball is named after. That was done right here on this campus.
Man, I think that's the really interesting thing about, like, you know, I grew up in Los Angeles.
Sure. And
coming to Boston, it just seems like there's so much history.
Yeah.
Although, you know, when we go around the world, we realize that America's quite a young country.
Yes.
So it's like, oh man, this has been around for 200 years. And you go somewhere in France, they're like, oh yeah, this has been around for, like, you know,
right.
1,000 years. You're like, oh, okay.
Like, they've got books older than our country.
They got books older than our country.
You can see here the Y's headquarters.
Wait, this is the Y? Okay, hold on.
Y right here.
Here, I'm going to do like, here, I'm going to shoot you. Go ahead and explain.
So this is the Y's headquarters, right sort of right connected to our campus. And you can kind of say they are our forebearers, because it was the Y that launched Northeastern. And we still maintain a relationship. Around the back, we'll see it on the other side. They did a big renovation of their main facility in conjunction to us building a new multi-use building that's both a dorm, reception space, and I think they do, and the gym, all connected to one another, that we call East Village. This is where our honors students stay, and they're right in the back of the Y.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, here, let me bring the camera back. There we go.
And we're really nicely situated in where much of the centers of the arts are in Massachusetts. The Boston Symphony is just down the way.
Yep.
The New England Conservatory of Music is right next door here.
Yeah.
You've got the Back Bay within an easy walking distance. The Christian Science Library about a third of a mile away. So when our students come here, you can access the arts, the big medical core in Boston. The Longwood Medical Campus is about 3/4 of a mile behind us. And it gives them the chance to literally walk to their co-op opportunities of some of the leading innovators around the world, and not be far from campus, though we have students who go all over the world for sure.
I was going to say, a lot of them do the co-op here.
Many of them do, but they also go all over the country. At the law school, our students go to about 20 different states every semester that they do co-op. And it's all over the eastern seaboard, the central parts of the country, the western states. Obviously Massachusetts is where most people will tend to be, but our students are well represented in New York, California, Pennsylvania, Seattle, certainly in the Midwest states. We definitely make an effort to get them out of the city. And we recruit from all over the world as well. So our co-op experiences, we try to, since they're coming from all over the place, we want to send them all over the place. To our left is the Matthews Arena. It's the oldest still standing indoor professional sports arena in the country.
Really? Over there?
Over there. It's going to go through a big renovation in the next few years. It'll be all up to date, state of the art, but this building is like vested in deep history. Both the Celtics and the Bruins played their first games in this very arena.
No kidding.
Bill Clinton came and spoke here when he was president years and years and years ago. It has a really deep legacy within the community, but the building's kind of passing its time, and they're going to take it down and put up a new one, which I think speaks to a lot of our identity of the school. We have a history within this area, but we're also growing and evolving. Sometimes you have to take down the old to make space for the new.
Very symbolic.
And by doing that, it allows us to expand and stay, hopefully at the cutting edge of everything, so that our students want to come here and play here and build a community here for the however many years they're here, if it's a 1-year master's, 3-year law degree, or 4 or 5-year undergraduate program.
Very cool. All right.
You can see the tower there behind the Y. That's the East Village I mentioned. It was a partnership between the university and the Y, where we helped them renovate the Y, as well as gave us some space to expand and create more space for our undergrads as the campus continues to grow. The Northeastern, from when you and I were kids, was largely a commuter school. Now it's heavily residential. We've definitely built up the dorm space. It's made it a much more attractive campus for students coming from all over the country, if not all over the world. We have a pretty large, I don't know the percentage, but one of the largest international student enrollments within the Boston area, certainly. In a city that has plenty of schools that have tons and tons of international students. So we are seeing students from all over the world who are coming here, and we kind of believe a big reason why they do is because of co-op. You could go anywhere else in the country and get a really strong experience in your undergraduate studies, etc. But to actually get this real world work experience outside of just maybe working a summer or two, there are not a lot of places that still do it, and certainly not at the scale that Northeastern does.
Yeah, I mean, that co-op program, I think I first heard of it when I moved to Boston, and I heard about Northeastern, and I was like, this idea of working, and not only that, I feel like in college is kind of an assumption. There's an assumption that or kind of pressure to hurry up and figure out what you're gonna do.
That's right.
And my theory is that the vast majority of kids have no idea, or their parents kind of just told them what to do. They're like, okay, or they're just on autopilot. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'll be a lawyer.
Right.
But they haven't really had the opportunity to explore, and I'm like, I feel like that piece was really missing.
Yes.
And so but oftentimes people find that out after graduating.
Yes.
And so now, and I guess other schools have internships, but I feel like even then, there's almost pressure to you have to keep going down this path.
Right.
Because, oh my gosh, lots of wind.
Well, welcome to Boston in January, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why we've maintained this model. It gives them the chance to do some exploration, sort out what they want to do before they commit, though many of them will use this as a launching pad into their first career job, and actually get a little bit of a leg up because you're there when other people aren't.
And it's not just like a 3-month summer internship. And then, because the problem is you work on a project but not really meaningful, and the company's like, well, this guy's going to disappear anyway. Right. But with a co-op, are there students who just continue to work at the same company?
Yes, there's students who go on to work at the same company after school. Some of them are able to work part-time when they come back to school. And you can do your co-ops throughout the year. The problem with the summer is everyone's on vacation. So half of the office is out, and you've got all these interns scrambling for an ever-shrinking piece of the pie. Whereas if you're around in the fall and the spring when everybody's back, everyone's focused on hitting the bottom line, meeting their Q2 or Q3 or end-of-year numbers, you can really get the meat of things in a way that sometimes the summer's kind of a weird bubble of slowness.
So it's almost like not a fake experience, but you don't get the real experience. And I think that's good and bad, right? Oh, sorry. You get to experience both the good and the bad. And so I think it's you can go in with the mentality of I need to get a job, I need to impress, which people do. Right. But also there's this additional, is this even the right fit for me?
Exactly.
And if it's not, I think you still have time to be okay, I'm glad I found that out during my first or second year. maybe I need to switch and
Yes.
explore different areas.
Yes, in fact, I can think of one of our work studies who works in my office. She started off as pre-med and discovered she really wants to be more into criminal justice work. And having the co-op experience helped her to sort that out, and now she's making a pivot in enough time to make that pivot.
Right.
There's a point at which it becomes really hard to pivot. But this is kind of like the center of campus.
Okay, wait, hold on. I'm gonna give it. All right, go for it.
So, like, that's the library.
Okay.
Snell, that's the main university library.
Yep.
The libraries within universities, at least in the United States, are actually in a period of transformation because there's not as much interest in physical books anymore. So what do libraries become? Instead of just being archives for holding media, can they be communal spaces for folks to be more collaborative in their studies, work on projects together? So if one were to go in, I don't think I can get you in, but if one were to go in there, you'd see a lot of kiosks and hangout spaces where students can get together with friends and work on projects together, meet up and chat about how the day was.
Right.
And this is a pattern for where libraries are headed, even community libraries. So we're definitely in the same path as where things are going as higher ed continues to evolve and innovate to meet with the new realities of the world where people aren't picking up physical books
Right.
like they used to.
Yeah.
Over to, I guess, in front of us there is the Curry Student Center, which is where the students come and hang out. There's a food court, plenty of meeting space for student associations. Believe it or not, that building's probably about 30 years old. When it was built at the time, it was considered to be a national leader in terms of investing in space for students to get together and hang out in a way that schools weren't doing that 30 years ago. When I was in college, we didn't have anything like this. Now a lot more schools are like this, but we'd like to say that Northeastern is kind of ahead of the game in anticipating the need for spaces for students to build community with each other outside of just dorm living.
And why is that community building seen as important? Because one could say, hey, school's about get the knowledge, get the degree, get a job.
Well, a couple of things. One, you're going to spend for 4 years a lot of your life here. This becomes your home. It's not just a place so this is where you eat, sleep, find places to hang out, socialize. So you want this to be an environment where you feel at home and you can be yourself. And some people have even discovered themselves, parts of their identities that they weren't able to bring out, probably among family. They were able to find community and safe spaces within schools. Second, it's where you can start to build your professional network. The people you're in class with, some of these folks are going to become some of the captains of industry, world innovators all over the world. And you start to build those relationship skills here in college, whether it's hanging out and playing ultimate frisbee or I guess I think these kids are a little too young for pickleball. I think pickleball is a little older, or the chess team or music or drama or whatever the case. This is all helping you to establish a network of relationships, whether it's with your fellow students, your professors, even members of the staff, that will help to build your career as you're going forward. So college is more than just studies. It really is a great microcosm for starting to develop the critical skills that you'll need to be successful in a global economy where you're going to be competing with people from all over the world, and you can't just live in your own little bucket or bubble.
Yeah.
Bad metaphor.
Hey, we'll make a new metaphor. Can't live in your own bucket, guys. You can't live in your own bucket. We're innovating.
Literally coming up with new things as we walk around. So this section here is part of some of the oldest sections of campus.
Okay.
Going back to some of these buildings probably go back to the 50s, maybe a little bit earlier. But they're also where a lot of administrative buildings are and such. I'm going to take you to one interesting little memorial that for the Red Sox fans out there and baseball fans will have some import to it. And I mentioned it earlier. We're going to swing around this little corner here to my right.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And
Let's
this
take a look
guy
at this.
here is Cy Young. And this was where, this is baseball's winningest pitcher. The award for pitching is named after him. And one of the first World Series was played right on these very grounds with this guy pitching at it. Back in, I think, like the 19-teens or something. So this is well over 100 years.
Wow.
Back when Northeastern was still very much a little baby, not the beast that we've grown up into. We've been part of the history of the city and even sport, as you can see, and we've memorialized that in this space right here in the middle of campus.
Very cool. And then we have the little thing over here. Cy Young.
While you're looking, you'll see those little bronze tags.
Yeah.
So our campus is recognized as one of the few in America that is actually an arboretum.
Oh, really?
Meaning that there are many varieties of unique trees that are planted around campus. And if you look around, you'll see kind of an odd medley of different trees. The leadership decided to be very intentional about creating a considerable amount of green space and not just planting a bunch of the same pine tree or the same oak tree. You'll see trees from probably all over the country, and they all have these little tags. You can see that there's a new one that just got planted recently that have become a part of our community and provide lovely green space during the summertime, as well as helping to clean the air, as we want to make sure that our environmental footprint is a sound one.
Very cool. All right. This guy. All right. Let's do it.
But I think as we're walking and seeing some of these new buildings, some of these old buildings, let's take this left over here. We're in a period of transition and change with new buildings, new students coming in. Like education, quite frankly, is in a weird space. We are all talking about artificial intelligence. We are, as an institution, pivoting ourselves to become an international leader in artificial intelligence. But what does that mean in terms of educating your future leaders?
Yeah. Because I think a lot of parents, I mean, not only like people who are looking to go to, the college or anything, but even earlier, just like parents are wondering like what, kind of Wayne Gretzky, I think, is kind of known for the whole like, don't skate to where the puck is, skate to where the puck is going.
Yes.
And so it's like, okay, artificial intelligence, that's where it's going. And a lot of parents are trying to figure out, how do I set my children up for success?
Right.
And so now what you're saying is Northeastern is also trying to skate where the puck is going.
Right. And the puck is moving really fast.
Yeah.
You think about where we were just maybe 24 months ago, compared to where we are now, where we've got these various tools, like ChatGPT has become sort of like the Q-tip and whiteout of artificial intelligence, but there are other technologies for sure. This is the law school space. But even though these technologies are moving rapidly, we're still trying to figure out, like, how do you reshape the learning experience in the classroom where you preserve academic integrity while also recognizing that the old ways of doing things just don't make any sense anymore. I think this is an interesting little sign for you here. Stop getting expelled by writing papers with ChatGPT.
That is so funny. Where is that? Come on, get down here. Nope, there it is. Stop getting expelled by writing papers with ChatGPT. Use cactus.ai. Get undetectable essays with citations that you can actually turn in. Wow, that's
So that's probably some kind of startup, I would imagine.
yes, I imagine. Yeah,
Trying to get out there and go where the puck is going, and they've put this little sign on campus as students are getting caught using these tools to write their papers, and schools are trying to recalibrate and try to put in place stricter enforcements around this.
it's a cat and mouse game.
It is, as the technology then evolves again to make the tool that they're using less traceable. But
Well,
I think the bigger question is,
Yes.
when you're writing, like, what is the goal of even writing
Yes,
these papers, right?
yes.
You're supposed to be, the whole experience of writing a big essay or term paper, it's not just turning in the product, it's how you're being transformed intellectually as you're studying the question, battling, debating within your head the issues that have been raised by scholars before you and trying to come up with some new conclusion. If you're not going through that exercise anymore, what are we doing to you? What are you doing to yourself if something else is doing all of that hard work? What are you retaining? How are your critical thinking skills maturing when you're turning all of that hard work over to this other tool? And I think that's a hard question that we're all trying to figure out how to address. I mean, obviously, it's great when one of these tools can help you write your emails better. Like, I've used it to help me draft. I had a job posting I had to write up. I said, okay, this is my job description. Spit out like a 2-page description for me. That was wonderful. But if you are, I don't know, let's say you're in a social science class and you're having to tackle your thesis is a major question of maybe how the last several years of racial upheaval in the United States has reshaped the landscape within a particular community, and you're looking at various qualitative and quantitative data. If you're not spending the time digesting all of this content and understanding some of these critical questions, are you able to come up with any new ideas, or are you just going to turn it over to this tool to sort of rehash old stuff?
Yeah.
And so you can pass in a paper and get a check mark.
Yeah. I guess it depends on your goal.
Right.
It depends not only on the goal of the institution, but also the individual. So like the student, and the goal of the institution is like, let's say it's to train them, blah, 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 blah. But the student's like, dude, I just want a degree and leave. then for that particular student,
right.
Yeah, they're probably just using ChatGPT.
Yeah, right. Like maybe for that student, if the whole reason why they're in college is to just get a piece of paper so they can move on.
Or my mom told me to go, so I'm here, but they themselves, are not super motivated.
Right. I think that's why I think schools are also looking at what we can do with more certificate programs. Like, if you are really looking just to be in school for a very narrow set of skills, do you really need a whole 4-year experience for that?
Yeah.
Could we do something that's narrower, that may be 18 months or 2 years or whatever, and gets you out there and working, which is actually kind of interesting because it kind of takes us back in time to when not everyone went to college. Like even today, only about, if you were to run the numbers in the United States, still close to 2/3 of the country does not have a college degree.
Really?
Shocking, isn't it? But and it seems like everyone here in a place like Massachusetts has a degree. But as you go outside of the sort of these more concentrated academic centers, and even parts of the city, there are plenty of people who don't have college diplomas, and they're able to live just fine.
Right.
Is this closed? Yes. So we need to take that bridge. I'm going to take you over to some of our newer buildings.
Okay.
What was I saying? So now what's happened certainly in the last 50 years is more and more people have gone to college, but it's still not the majority of the country. But now it seems like as the importance of a college degree is being questioned, it might be that we're heading back in another direction where we're actually maybe looking at sort of finishing programs perhaps, or after high school, maybe if you're looking to be a coder, do you need 4 years of college to be a coder? Especially when a lot of that coding anyway is going to be done by AI.
Right.
What's sort of the next level up from that doesn't require as much financial investment? And then maybe college is more for another set of people. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a really interesting kind of like first principles way of looking at it. It's what is college? Because the concept associated with college to the average person is 4 years.
Yes.
4 years and you get a diploma. And I was talking with someone, one of my previous interviewees who was at UCLA, and he was talking about how he has friends or he knows people, 4-year computer science, Stanford, whatever, and they can't get a job. Because I talked to my other friend, who I just did an interview with also. He is a startup co-founder.
Sure.
And he's saying how he's no longer hiring junior people because he'd rather hire senior people who know how to use AI rather than juniors who don't have experience.
Yes.
And so they're both kind of confirming the supply side and the demand side.
Yes.
And so now let's say this person just invested like $400,000 into a degree, and is having difficulty finding a job, and I can imagine how they would feel, which I feel anger, I feel like I've been lied to. Like I was told if I go to a good institution, get a 4-year degree, I'm gonna be set for life.
Right.
And when that contract is broken, you're like, what the heck?
Yeah, yes. It's funny you mention that because with the Great Recession, which is now, 15 years ago now, that was a big dilemma, certainly in legal education, where people came out of school and expected, well, I should have a job. There are no jobs. What do I do now? And sort of skipping years into the future, what we are seeing is employers are no longer patient with training you.
Yeah.
They're expecting you to come ready to go, as ready to go as possible. Because it's expensive training you, especially if after they've spent money in training you, you're going to up and leave and take all of that knowledge somewhere else. Why don't I just get someone who already has the knowledge and actually wants to come work for me instead of someone just using me as a stepping stone to somewhere else.
It's almost like it kind of reminds me of like when kids are born, there's a 9-month gestation period and they come out. And so the funny thing is actually people say there's 3 trimesters, but they say the 4th trimester is when the baby is out. But they're helpless. You have to like take care of everything, and it almost feels like college. Also, you come out of the womb, and then they're still helpless. Like you're like all this help, and they're just like, dude, why am I need like a high schooler who will help me around the house. I don't need to take care of another baby.
Exactly, and that's why I think schools that are willing to invest in programs that compel students to get themselves out there and gain experience, whether it's through things like co-ops, practicums that are attached to their classes, where maybe the class has an experiential component. Like probably in the last 10 or 15 years, the big word in higher education has been experiential education.
Which
means you got to get some practical skills. So not just the book knowledge, but what are you doing to apply the stuff out there in the real world? Like it's all well and good for me to teach you stats theory, but then what does that look like when we have to work out an actual problem that affects a company's bottom line? And have the fire of, like, we're going to lose millions of dollars if you don't get this right.
It's not a theoretical exercise.
Exactly. Sitting underneath me. One thing that we've been, certainly in legal education, that we're looking at is what we're calling professional identity formation. It's something that seminaries have been doing forever, which is really helping you to think about what are the critical values and skills that I need to inculcate that would help me, that would compel me to become, to mastery and excellence in my industry. And how do I learn what that mastery looks like? What does excellence look like? What do those competencies look like? And how do I also market myself to an employer so they see the value that I bring in the door? So that when I sit down for that interview and they ask me, tell me about yourself, that obnoxious question that all of us hate. They don't care about your life journey.
Well, I was born in Los Angeles.
No, it's all about what can you do for me now and tomorrow. And you have to know enough about yourself to be able to answer that question competently and start the work of building those skill sets to be able to make yourself marketable. It's not going to be enough to just have a shiny bachelor's degree. We crank out hundreds of thousands of shiny bachelor's degrees, even from like Ivy League schools, as you've mentioned, or the Stanford, the Ivy League of the West Coast, etc. What's going to differentiate you? It's those kids who are able to, they know how to code. They know how to manipulate AI in a way to make their work more productive and save me, the employer, money so that I can then make more money. So how can we as schools work towards innovating that? These two buildings that you see, one directly in front of us here.
Hold on, let me turn this around. Sure. All right, go for it.
This is the EXP building. That's our newest building on campus. Just opened October of 2023. And then to my left is the ISEC building. These are all collaborative research spaces. Like if you were to go into EXP, you'd see cool robotic stuff with the robotic arms and whatnot that people are working on. I have a friend who's a researcher who works in one of these buildings that's working on not 5G, but a few generations in terms of ahead, like 6, 7, or 8G, in terms of telecommunications innovation that will hopefully harness some of that AI to be able to have robots more integrated into our day-to-day work. So the institution is investing in these kinds of spaces to create opportunities for our students, certainly in the sciences and maybe in some areas, perhaps in some of these other disciplines, to work on these technologies and be able to come out of school and go to a Microsoft or a Home Depot even and be able to say, I have what it takes to be able to help you move your bottom line more quickly than this other person, because I've already started doing some of this work. And by the way, I have some ideas for how you can do your work even better than you're doing it now. Right. But it can't be just sitting in the classroom and reading textbooks and taking exams. You got to actually work on real life problems. Yeah. And that's what we really try to get our students out there doing over here.
Yeah, I think that's like so interesting, because I think like sometimes, I think I'll use the ChatGPT example. We sometimes lose sight of it. We get so caught up in like, okay, the cat and mouse game that we forget why are we playing this game in the first place? Like, oh, I got to figure out how I can detect when students cheat. It's like, wait a minute, we can do that.
Yes.
But why are we doing this? Oh yeah, we're trying to train minds and critical thinking. Same thing, it's like, oh, we're trying to teach them this and you gotta get a good grade and you gotta say it in this way and answer that. And we're like, wait a minute, what are we trying to do here?
Exactly. Look, your point about chasing the grade is a really astute one, because we have sort of separated learning, the excellence that, we've separated academic excellence from mastery and the
Yes.
the rigor of wrestling with hard questions. Because you're going to come to a point in your life at some point where there isn't an answer. And ChatGPT can't answer that because it's a question that hasn't come up yet.
Yeah.
The power of the human intellect throughout the course of modern human civilization is our ability to look at these problems that were probably always there, or maybe have come up but no one's thought about before, and innovate new ideas to address them. I think that's one of the beauties of the mind that God has given humanity, that these little brains, as small as they are, have this incredible creative power to come up with stuff that's never existed before. But to get there, you have to have a problem to solve and have those critical skills to be able to deconstruct the problem and see what things I can move forward to bring a new answer into place. If I don't have that opportunity to wrestle with those challenges and I'm just sort of pursuing the grade, then when I come to that problem where the answer isn't clear or obvious or someone hasn't already noodled it out yet, I'm going to be stuck. And then I'm probably going to be out of work.
Yes, because then if you're stuck and you can't create, which is kind of an innately kind of human thing,
yes,
as of right now,
yes,
then they're just like, I'll just get AI to do that work because you're taking up a lot of space and a lot of money and you're affecting my bottom line,
yes,
my profit. So I'm going to replace you with this machine. And you're like, wait, hold on. I can use the machine to come up with new ideas. They're like, very interesting. Let's continue the conversation. But if you can't do that,
yes, what
are you here for?
Exactly.
Like, we're not here as a nonprofit to try to help you get academic excellence. Businesses don't. So I think like that's like a rude awakening for students. It's like their whole lives they've been trained to get good grades. I see this a lot in Korea. I hear from Koreans who tell me all they care about is the grade. Get the good grade, go to the good school,
yeah,
and they assume everything will work out.
Yes.
Whereas when they go there and business is not, they don't care about how much your academic excellence is, your GPA. They care about the bottom line, which is affected by coming up with new ideas,
yes,
new ways of being more operational,
yes,
operationally efficient, coming up with new innovative business ideas. That's what they care about. They don't care you got a 4.0 GPA.
Exactly. Like in a lot of ways, that 4.0, that grade is very retrospective in the sense of it's showing that you were able to master something that was done before. And we need you to be a prospective thinker where you're looking at possibilities that haven't been considered. I think probably the one industry that has been doing this forever that we can learn a lot from is just medicine.
Medicine.
Like you go to a doctor and sometimes people have problems. Like think about where we were 2.5 years ago. Before we lost, 3 years ago now, I guess. 4 years ago, before we lost several million people. Suddenly here was this crazy disease that no one had even known about. And people were dying in ever increasing numbers. And some folks in these labs just got down and went to work and coming up with, say whatever you want about the vaccines, those things have saved lives. And now we're at a place where coronavirus is still here, but neither of us is wearing a mask right now.
Yeah.
We've probably gotten it a few times ourselves, but we're still alive. We've got loved ones who are living through it, and it's become like catching the cold. It took folks who are willing to not rely on former science, but try new stuff and ask these hard questions and dare to like experiment and, blow open the box that they were using before and try something different, and sometimes even failing. And that's another part that's problematic with this obsession with grades. You gotta be okay with failure.
Oh, that's so good.
Because if you can't accept failure, you can't change. If you believe in evolutionary biology, a lot of that it's about failure. Like some creatures live and some creatures die because Like the tools aren't there to survive, and it takes a bit of trial and error to get there. And by making mistakes and then figuring out why I made those mistakes, I can correct and then change and hopefully do it better the next time, so that the next time this problem comes up, I'll remember, okay, that's why I got it wrong, and this is how I can do it better. If I only work towards getting things right, then when something doesn't fit into that, my bucket metaphor again, then I'm stuck and I don't know what to do with it. So like, to the extent that we can give students the opportunities to sometimes fail, and I'm not saying that you should go out and get Fs all the time, because let's face it, like, it's a lot of money you're spending going to school. And there is something to be said for having solid grades. But if there isn't an opportunity for you to sometimes make mistakes and then find the space to learn from them, it really inhibits your ability to grow and evolve and be a meaningful, effective contributor towards future work. All the great inventors of time, Thomas Edison, I don't know how true these stories are, but when he invented the incandescent light bulb, which none of us uses anymore, it took him thousands upon thousands of tries before he figured out a filament that would work, that would burn long enough that it wouldn't explode, and you could actually turn a light on and read a book at night. Those are folks who are willing to take chances and experiment and explore and fail and try again. Colleges should be spaces where people have the chance to experiment and sometimes fail. Yeah. Not fail too much. It's a lot of money again.
Well, strategic failing.
But strategically fail. And by failing, I don't mean failing your final exam, but maybe you got that problem set wrong, and you go back and figure out what I could have done better. And don't just spit it into ChatGPT and let it do the work for you, but actually go back and figure out, okay, what was the step that I missed in here, so that the next time I encounter that challenge, I know what I was missing this last time, and I can plug that hole and get to and move the needle forward.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about failure is almost everybody remembers the problems that they failed.
Yes.
Because they are so pissed, and they're like, why did I get that wrong? And they look into it. The ones they got right, they forget.
Exactly.
And I think this touches on kind of this topic of motivation.
Yeah.
It's going back to Thomas Edison example, whether it's true or not, great story. Would someone who was given a homework assignment go through that many iterations?
Right.
Answer is probably no. Especially the guy who's like, dude, I'm just here for a grade. I'm gonna try like two things I tried. I'm gonna write up my report. But it's this motivation, this curiosity of, he's like, I wonder if this worked. Oh, I wonder if this will work. And the question of like, how do you ignite that? How do you kind of like, it's like a small little kindling of like a little spark. How do you grow it? Because most academic institutions, it's more about like, hey, just get the grade, do what you need. But I don't know how you kind of grow this other side, which I think is so important to innovation, this just fun, curiosity-driven thing.
I think some of it is dependent on, and it's cold, so let's keep walking.
Let's keep walking.
Some of it depends on the energy that the instructor brings into the classroom, the teacher. Like, some of my best teachers were some of the hardest ones I had, but they motivated me towards excellence in the sense of trying harder, not just to get the grade, but maybe spending a little bit more time with my work to make sure I understood the problem. And those teachers, they bring an energy into the classroom, or whatever the experience is, that should stimulate that student. But I don't think you can rely only on the teacher. It has to be, Hillary Clinton used to say it takes a village. One of the core elements of co-op is also developing mentor relationships. Everybody should have a mentor. Who is that mentor? That's someone who sees something in you and can stir stir up whatever that gift is and challenge you to take chances that you would not have taken otherwise. Sometimes that's a teacher, sometimes it's a parent, sometimes it's a pastor, sometimes it's an older sibling. But it pains me for those who don't see the value in having those people in those relationships of folks who've lived life before us, to encourage us towards trying and pushing ourselves, because it really holds the person back from really excelling to the next place. Because ultimately you can only see so much, and having someone who's outside of you, who has a broader perspective on life than you do, can really help you to get a better framing of yourself and what's out there. And you should have multiple mentors even. And sometimes sometimes you'll have the mentor you have today may not be the one you have in 10 years, but constantly finding those people in your life who are willing to invest their time, and you're willing to invest, to kind of surrender your own ego and listen and learn and take in some of their wisdom, that will only serve you well in your future aspirations, and hopefully stimulate you to do what we were just talking about a couple minutes ago, which is not just trying to get the grade, but putting in the time and investment to make the mistakes and learn from them and understand the why behind why I got that wrong, as well as the why as to why I got that right, instead of just checking off a box somewhere. Now, where we are, this is kind of the outer fringe of campus. Behind us is International Village, which is an undergraduate dorm. There's a dining hall over there. It's known for its different culinary options from all over the world. That allows students to maybe get a little flavor of their own cultures. Northeastern sits sort of in between several communities here in Boston that are of a wide strata of socioeconomics. Behind us is the South End, which has a lot of sort of gentrified brownstones. In front of us is Roxbury, which has a history of Boston of really tough socioeconomics. And then sort of diagonally from us is Mission Hill, which is sort of which economically is kind of in between them. And what we'd like to be as a school is a place where the folks in these communities don't feel like we're just coming to invade their spaces, but our students can be a part of these communities. Many of them live in these neighborhoods, but also get involved in causes, initiatives, opportunities that can help to lift people up, so we're not like colonial invaders, but parts of the greater Boston community, and that their lives are being hopefully made a little bit better because of Northeastern, but Northeastern is also made better because they're here with us as well. Sort of in front of us is the John D. O'Brien Institute, named for, I believe is the first Boston School Committee member of African American descent. And the university's preserved his legacy by setting up this institute that does a fair amount of community work, has talks, conferences, different means of collaboration, recognizing that as we are part of this city, we owe a debt to this community to pay it forward in a way where we're not just sort of living on an island to ourselves. You can see this is an open campus. There are no fences around. The public can come and float around as they see fit. Whereas if you were in some other schools, it might be a big walled garden. And I can't say for sure, but I do believe that's part of the ethos of the institution, of preserving access to other folks. And certainly Boston Public School kids could come to Northeastern schools and for programs and such. These buildings here are dorms. When I was in high school, oh gosh, 30 years ago this year, these are all parking lots. This entire stretch was a sea of parking lots because, as I shared at the beginning of our talk, this was a commuter school. It was the place where a lot of kids from the Boston area can come and get an education and go home. Take the T, maybe drive in.
And the T is the subway.
The subway,
whatever,
sorry.
Yeah.
Mass transit system.
Yeah.
And then head home. Now where our undergrads are largely here on campus in these residential dorms, as the university made a decision years ago to pivot towards, by creating these residences, it actually makes your school more accessible to the world. Whereas when you're a commuter school, you're just going to get the local kids in town. And those people have brought their cultures, their experiences to enrich the sort of the broad mosaic that this institution has become, and continue to do so as we continue to draw folks from all over the world. We also send our students, many of our undergrads do study abroads all over the country. You can start your Northeastern studies at our London campus. That sign there, 115 years of co-op, as I mentioned. Well placed. All of these are efforts at trying to recognize that we can't just accept the times that we're in, but we've got to be planning ahead for the future. And in an increasingly globalized society, we've got to bring the world here to prepare us to meet the demands of the rest of the world. We can't assume that we have all the knowledge as Americans. And by those students, those researchers, professors, great thinkers, as they choose to come to our institution, it helps to prepare us for whatever the future is going to hold in the coming years.
Yeah. Man, I underestimated how cold it was going to be today.
Yeah, it is super cold. Yeah, man. You want to go inside?
The past few days here in Boston, it's been like very warm. And today is just taking a turn for the cold.
Well, they're saying it's going to be like this for the next week.
Oh, really?
But this is January, right? This is how January usually is.
Yeah.
We've been spoiled for sure, but it makes us a hardier people, I like to say. Being able to withstand the cold.
Man, I mean, the past few months we've been in Los Angeles, and tomorrow we're getting on a flight to go back to Korea.
Wow.
But I think coming here, it's like, oh yeah, it's a reminder that
let's do a shortcut.
There are places where it's cold.
Yes.
Unlike LA, where most of the time it's warm. Oh yeah, there's winters going on in other places in the world like Boston and Korea.
Well, we still try to have 4 seasons here. I feel bad sometimes when I see parents come for campus tours and they get one of these lovely days, where it's 75 in October, 80 in May, and the sun's out. And I want to say, you should come today when it's 30 degrees with 35 mile an hour gusts. Or when it's pouring rain and 45. Or 2 weeks ago when we got 5 inches of snow that no one was prepared for.
Why would you tell parents to come in those miserable times and not in the good times?
Because then you get the full experience.
Ooh, and I think that's related to also what you're talking about, the co-op.
Yes, exactly. If you come only when there are fun summer parties and hangouts and happy hours afterwards, what happens when it's late January, you've got a deadline, and it's 11 o'clock at night, and you still got 6 hours of work left?
Yeah.
And it's pitch black outside and frigid cold. And yeah, that's real work life. Not a 90-degree day hanging out on the roof deck of some very nice bear garden in downtown Boston or wherever.
Like, do you feel like there are students who like go through the internships and they're like, man, this is a great experience, and then they because of that they base their decisions on that data point, and they enter the career and they're like, oh
Yeah,
really?
oh yeah, that happens all the time, which I'm hoping, and even with students who do co-op, like, you just assume that my experience is sort of the full dimension of everything. I tell my students, and I've been working as a career advisor for law students since 2011, it's a good idea to spend a good year someplace. Just a year. Don't leave after 6 months, unless there's something like totally toxic.
Yeah.
But, because by spending a year, you at least get to have the full rhythm of things. And you see the ups and downs and the ebbs and the flows. And it gives you a chance to test your resilience. Because if you always leave when things get tough, you'll never stay anywhere. And you may never really know what you like and what you don't like.
That's a great point.
We are back in the law school.
Oh, it's so warm. See, the viewers don't know how cold it was. But maybe you do by watching us sniffle.
I got gloves on still because my hands are freezing.
But I think that's like such a great point. It's because it's almost to say that these internships, the co-ops or whatever, it's not an end in itself. It's a means to an end.
Right.
But I think people forget that, right? They assume this is the end. Like, let's get that internship. I'm good. Let's get that offer letter. I'm good. When the kind of more meta question is this even, is this the right fit?
And that goes the same for even your job. Like, even when you get the job, there's going to come a point in your life where you're going to have to ask, have I outgrown this experience? And not everyone's ready for that question. And you can't necessarily rely on your boss to answer that question either.
By the way, where are we?
This is my glorious office. Welcome to the inside of the Center for Co-op and Career Development at Northeastern Law School. We call ourselves for short the law school's co-op office. And I have the distinct pleasure of heading up a team of 11 folks who help our students both find 3 4-month legal co-ops as well as postgraduate jobs. And along the way also helping them to start to begin to form a professional identity and be able to ask themselves critically, like, what's happening to me when I'm undergoing all of these experiences? What am I learning? What do I know now that I didn't know before? What are the new questions that I need to be able to answer for myself? Where do I see myself fitting into an office culture, into a community culture? And do I have the skill set to be able to succeed in this area? And if I don't, how do I get there? Because yes, this co-op will help you get a job, but then when you get to that job in a couple of years, you might be like, well, I need to move on. So then what do you do when you get to that place? And you don't want to leave that job just to go to the next job, to get you out of the job you were in.
Right.
You want to go to the next job because you feel that the next job is the next right step for you, and understand why. Because if you're using one thing to escape from the next, that is a really unfair burden you're putting on that next employer, because they're going to fill a need. They're going to be stuck with having to fill a need that they're not equipped to fill, because you haven't even figured out what that need is in yourself yet.
Yeah.
Come on in.
Come on in. Whew. This is real and raw.
Yeah.
He did not prepare this office for us.
I did not prepare my office at all. This is where I left it since Christmas break. People laugh at my hourglass and 30-minute glass, because for me, time is the one commodity that you can never get back. You can always make more money, but you can't make more time. And I don't like when people waste my time. You want to have a seat?
All right. All right.
All right.
And we're back at it.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Whew. I forgot how cold Boston is. Although it is kind of nice. It's kind of like preparing me. It's like LA, then we're in New York, and then Boston, and now back to Korea. It's like, oh yeah, it's cold.
How cold is Korea then right now?
It's similar, I think similar weather as, Boston, four seasons and all that. What were we talking about?
I think.
Getting kind of like a realistic
Yeah.
picture. Getting a realistic picture. And I kind of took a really interesting idea, because it's like, ideally you would want your educational institution to give you a realistic picture of the working world, which I think co-op, that's like, I don't know if that's the closest you can get to it, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
But also there's this other element of what we had kind of talked about before, which is it's not about just pursuing this one thing, the grade. It's a multifaceted problem. It's about like your identity. It's about, like you said, because if you haven't even figured out your identity, your values, then it's hard to figure out what you want.
Right.
And then it's like, there's this thing that's said in Christian circles where it's like people have a God-sized hole in their heart and trying to fill it with work, with money, whatever, and they'll never fill it. It's the same thing. And then when that person goes to find a spouse, they're looking to fill a God-sized hole, and the spouse can never fill it. So the spouse they feel like, I'm constantly unappreciated, because they just want more and more. And they're like, dude, I can't give you more.
Right.
And you're saying the same thing could happen with employers,
Yes.
where employers are like, dude, you want work-life balance, you want this and that, and we're not an organization designed for you.
Yes.
You are joining us to help us grow. And so I would think that would cause issues.
It's funny you mention this. A professor friend of mine introduced me to this. It's like a Zen diagram called Ikigai.
Oh yeah.
Yes, you've probably seen it.
It was actually mentioned by a friend on the Han River as I was walking and jogging with it. But explain.
So at least in the versions of it I've seen, if you imagine 4 overlapping circles, one is what I'm good at, one is what I like, one is what I get paid for, and one is what the world needs. And a lot of times, particularly among younger professionals, they want their job to fit all 4 of those. And there isn't a job in the world, and I love my job, that can fill all of that. Sometimes your first job is just going to be what you're good at and what someone will pay you for. That the world doesn't need that much. Or sometimes your first job is what someone will pay you for, and maybe you like it, but you're not terribly good at it. And then the thing that the world needs, you may not be able to get paid for right out of school, because you don't have enough experience for someone to entrust you with someone's life, or life, liberty, and property in a meaningful, substantial way. So what I try to tell folks is recognizing that your job can never fill all of these, not unlike the example you give of the God hole and having your God gap in your heart and trying to have a spouse figure all of that out. Recognizing that all of these 4 are important, how can you find other ways to fill those? Some of that may be volunteering. And volunteering can be a great way to hone certain skills and develop new relationships and solve real problems that where there is need, but there just aren't resources to pay you for yet. It also helps you to recognize that even the most well-intentioned boss is not always necessarily invested in your holistic development. Your boss has a goal that they have to meet. They have an objective that they're trying to achieve, and they've hired you to meet that objective. Sometimes where you really want to be is not where your boss wants you to be. And sometimes people get mad at their boss because they're holding me back. They're not necessarily holding you back, but where you're looking to be, your vision may be bigger than that job. And there may not be a job for you in that office. So then it takes being reflective and introspective and asking myself, like, if we think about those 4 quadrants, and there may be more than those 4, but starting with those 4, where is my job fitting in all of these? And where can I also get these other needs met? And structuring my life so that there are opportunities to tap into these at different intervals so that I can feel, so that I'm not putting so much pressure on my job to be the in and of itself, or my career as a whole to be in and of itself, and allow yourself the space to evolve and change as you expose yourselves to other dimensions that may touch each of those different relationships, those different circles.
It reminds me of actually one of my jobs. I worked near the TD Garden, and it was a digital identity. And one of the things that it was basically take a picture of a driver's license, and then we'll tell you if it's real or fake. Yeah. Banks were getting interested because you used to do business in the physical world by showing my driver's license. Yep. But now I'm doing online transactions, and I don't want to go into the physical branch. Yep. How can I take a picture of my driver's license and do this digitally? And one of the interesting things when we're trying to sell this software is people or our prospects would say, well, I want it to be super fast verification and very high threshold of like, I know there's. And so I'm thinking about this. I'm like, man, they want a unicorn. They want something that's they want the best of everything. Kind of like this Ikagi concept. I want everything. And I think part of it was they didn't understand. Right. So just like you said, like I did Ikagi, that framework helps you understand that there are trade-offs, or it gives you a bounding box so that you can understand it. Whereas if you don't have that bounding box, you have no concept. Like my prospects, they're just like, oh, you can't give me everything? On to the next. And I want to tell them, like, you will keep searching and you'll never find it. So what I did one day, I was trying to visualize it for myself, was I created this like 2x2, and I'm just like, higher authentication, more friction though. Sure. So it's like, okay, in cases, you can either get higher authentication, higher friction. Right. So an example of that is take a picture of your driver's license, take a picture of your selfie, match up with the government. Like, it's very high friction. However, you're very sure that this person. And then there's the opposite of very low friction. Sure. But very low authentication. Sure, right? Like, it's just like create a username and password. I can be anyone. I'm just going to create a quick username and password, right? Yeah. So I would walk them through, and then I would kind of walk them through like, hey, you don't need Fort Knox for every situation. Right. Like certain situations, you just want a fence. Yep. And even that fence is not locked. Yeah. But as they proceed to come in and they're doing, for example, more sensitive, more higher transactions, then you want to increase the authentication. And at that point, they're okay with the friction. So just walking them, once I walked them through this, they were like, oh, I get it. And then I would restrict the conversation to, of this stuff, where are you? And they could see themselves. And I almost imagine like the same thing with if you're talking to a student who's just like, I want everything, but they don't understand that they want everything and how unrealistic they are. Right. But if you're able to use just some framework, it doesn't have to be that framework, just some framework. Yes. You can say, you have this, this, and this, and this. I'll be honest, You will not be able to choose one. What is the one thing?
Right.
Do you want passion? Do you want money?
Yeah.
And then once you choose that, like you said, you're like, okay, you have chosen that. Let's say you have 100 coins. You invested 80 coins in that.
Yeah.
You can distribute the coins in the other sections for you to be happy. You want to touch the other sectors that you didn't get.
Right.
But like you said, like it doesn't necessarily have to be a full-time thing.
Right.
It could be a part-time, your passion project, and developing your skills. Yeah, go volunteer, and you can hit those two. And now you're looking at a holistic picture.
Yes.
And the person walks away. And the added benefit is when they're working at the job and they're not enjoying it, they at least know I understand why.
Yes.
It's not. I think it's the unknown that bothers people.
Yes. 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 That is so astute. And I sometimes ask myself, were our forebears like 100 years ago even asking these questions? Like 100 years ago, were people actually asking about, is my job fulfilling? Probably not.
Probably not.
It's like, I gotta feed my family.
Yes.
And there is a lot to be said for our current time, where we are asking questions about mental health, well-being, work-life balance, fulfillment, social justice, the values of an organization. But I do think there was a lot to be said for understanding the objective you were trying to achieve, which in its most fundamental sense was, I gotta feed my family.
Yeah.
And if that's gonna get me out of bed every day, I'm gonna get up and feed my family and go forth. I feel like somehow we've sort of lost a little bit of that in sort of creating the sense that work has to fill all of these holes, and work was never meant to do that. Work does fill a very important gap.
Yeah, it's a big part of our lives.
It's where we spend more of our lives than we do with our families.
Yeah.
But even still, it needs to be, as you said, it needs to be given its appropriate context, and appreciate which one of those quadrants it can reasonably occupy well, and not try to make it fill other stuff. Where I've seen people fail is when they try to bring stuff into work that shouldn't be in work.
Can you give an example?
Like too much oversharing in the workplace about your personal life, when the boss may not be equipped to handle that. Or recognizing that we can have fun at work, but there are times when you just have to hunker down and do the job. And sometimes it can be a little deceptive, especially in some industries where you've got, like the ping pong table, and they've got an unlimited tap. That's there for a reason. They're recognizing that you're going to be here for a while. We're going to try to meet that a little bit. But if you're a young 22-year-old and you don't know your boundaries yet, then some of that stuff can start to spill into the quadrant that work is meant to occupy. Yeah. And you either set yourself up for failure because you're not meeting your benchmarks, or you're not satisfying your goals, or you feel very frustrated because the employer is not meeting these unreachable goals that you've established that the job was never intended to occupy.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like kind of young people who, let's say they're fresh graduates or whatnot, and some of the things that they don't know, like kind of talking about the boundaries, like there are certain things that you shouldn't say, or certain things that you shouldn't do.
Right.
And they're just like, well, but we were just hanging out at the ping pong table. I was just talking to you like that. Now I'm just talking to you like this. But you have to know how to kind of shift context sometimes.
Yes. And I think that comes back to, again, the value of having opportunities like internships, particularly in off-cycle sessions. Like if you're not at a school where they have co-op around the year, but you can even try to find some work in a place during your academic terms, where you can see people when it's not during the summer season, when everyone's chill, and you see how folks interact, and adjust and sort of pivot, move between sometimes those not always clear lines, but lines that still exist between what's appropriate when we're hanging out at TGI Fridays after work versus what we can do in the office. Like I've seen students who don't understand that dynamic and get themselves in trouble because no one's telling them that there is this sort of unspoken hidden curriculum that's going on. But you have to pick up on it, and the people who succeed are the ones who can pick up on it really quickly. And these are not the things that they test on interviews. These are not the things that come up in your application. These are kind of things that people just expect you to know. And this gets back to my point about having mentors, people who can tell you the rules of the road, what are some things that are appropriate to do and not appropriate to do. Something very practical I tell students: don't bring water bottles to interviews.
Oh.
And they're like, why not? And this is funny because when I look at kids, college kids, everybody's got a water bottle. They carry it everywhere. I see them on the train. They've got water bottles. They've been carrying water bottles since they were little kids. Why don't you bring a water bottle to an interview? Couple of things. One, the interview is supposed to be a conversation between you and this person who's trying to get to know you a little bit better, understand if you fit in the office. Now you've got this bottle that kind of gets in the way, like where do you put it? Should I put it? What if the person doesn't want it on their desk? If you put it on the floor and you knock it over, that's another cause of anxiety for you. Two, if you're stopping to drink, pick up the bottle and then put it back down again, it can be really distracting. Three, it can also convey a lack of seriousness about the experience that you're in. This is not meant to be just a casual conversation. This is you proving to yourself what your very best self looks like. And chances are you lugging around a bottle is not your very best self. Four, you might spill it on the ground, like if the lid flips off and then you've now made a big mistake because you've gotten it all in your papers. Take away all those extra distractions. And sometimes it takes someone saying to you, just don't do that. And having people in your life where you're willing to go to them and ask them those questions that are hard, ask them those sometimes seemingly idiotic questions, but you need an answer to because no one else is telling you what they are, and them being willing to be honest with you that can set you up for success from the person who is carrying around the Poland Spring bottle of water and spilling it all over the floor, from the person who comes to the office looking like they're ready to show excellence, who are focused, professional, whatever that word means, that they understand the gravity of the space that they're in.
I think it's you touch on an interesting concept of, I remember me hearing it first, I don't know if it's first, but it really kind of came to me when I was going through Marine officer training, which was perception is reality.
Yes.
And I hated that. Because I'm like, technically perception is not reality. Yeah. Reality is reality. Yeah. Perception is an incorrect perception of reality sometimes. And so my thought was, if somebody has an incorrect perception of me, the longer they get to know me, they'll realize that that wasn't true, and it'll change them. And I guess that was kind of it was a naive way of looking at the world. So for instance, I remember I had an instructor who, from the very get-go, did not like me because basically we were supposed to go through training, and I said, oh, hey, I'm actually going to go to this unit that's going to go to Iraq. We have about a month, 2 months break time. I'd like to go and train with the unit, and I can come back. And he's like, no, what the heck? No, you're a student. We have a training program. Yeah. Sit down. I don't know what you're trying to do. And for me, it was just more like, oh, I think this is the right thing to do. This is a temporary training session. They're gonna be my real unit going to Iraq. So why don't I do that? And he's like, no, what are you doing? And so that kind of started this series of Here's another example. Like we're doing this like kind of exercising thing. You have to do burpees. So you have to do like 50 burpees or something.
Sure.
So I got to the station, did 50 burpees, and I was about to leave. And he's like, "Wait, Sung, did you do all your burpees?" I'm like, "Yes, sir. Yeah, I did it all." He's like, "I don't think you did." I'm like, I mean, I did, sir.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Okay, whatever, let me go." But it's all these little things. And in my mind, I'm like, I know he doesn't view me, he has a negative perception of me, but over time it'll get better. But it didn't. It kept getting worse and worse and worse. And what I didn't realize is what I thought was if I have equal amount of interactions with him over time, the truth will eventually emerge, which may be true. The problem that I didn't factor in is the power of a first impression and how it sticks to that person and it colors every interaction. So I assumed every interaction he'd be objective and fair, when in fact his first interaction was negative. And the next interaction he's like, "Oh, look at this piece of crap." And "Oh, look at that piece of crap doing that crappy attitude again and again." And so this negative bias goes, and eventually I got to the point where I basically got kind of put on a board where they were going to think about kicking me out of the program. And I'm just like, how did I get here? How is this possible? I thought eventually it would get figured out. But that's when I like got hit with the reality of perception is reality. And I, at the time, did not have a mentor, like you said, to be like, "Sam, you need to stop doing this." And that would be like, "Why? I don't understand." It's like, you need to stop, dude. But nobody did. And so I had to learn the hard way. And it was like, I don't know about traumatized, but it was such a big lesson that I had to learn the hard way, being a 22-year-old. And I'm just like, I don't understand. My understanding that reality is incorrect.
Right. Oh, I love that example. I don't think that a lot of times folks appreciate just how powerful that first interaction is, because they are coming, it's the first time they encounter you as a clean slate. Granted, there are perceptions and all of that stuff, but they don't know anything else about you other than what other information may have come in. And you have this one moment to take this encounter in any direction, and you'll never have that moment again. Everything else will be shaped by that moment. Even if you recover that relationship, it'll still never get back to that seminal moment when you first encounter them. So what can I do to make that first moment as positive as possible? Which then allows me to eventually, over the course of that, maybe we'll never meet again, maybe we will, but at least gives me the chance, a fair shot of being fully heard. Whereas if I put something else in there that may disrupt that, I'll never recover that sort of white space, that first impression. And like you had to deal with your very difficult superior, every other experience was going to be a response to that initial encounter, or a response to the last one. And it takes a little bit of knowing oneself to be able to know what I don't know, and be able to reach out to people who know more than me and trust in their wisdom, and know that I don't have all the answers, and everything that I've done up to this point is not going to answer for what's coming in the next few minutes. A lot of times, some of your best mentors are people who you think are less educated than you, but have lived life and have dealt with some stuff and have been through the mill, may not have had the great accolades in school and sports and such, but just lived life and made mistakes and overcame, and were just ordinary people, but were able to endure life and be reflective about what their experiences are, and then turn around and speak that wisdom into you. And you have to be at a place where you can receive it with humility. And by humility, I don't mean thinking less of oneself, but recognizing that I don't know everything, and this is an opportunity for growth for me. And seeing our encounters with other people as opportunities, not burdens. Whether it's sometimes it's sitting with the elderly grandparent who we may think, they're these old boomers who don't know anything. But these people have met thousands more people than we've met.
Yeah.
And that isn't to say that they haven't made mistakes and don't have their own prejudices and such, but odds are you're probably going to get something out of that conversation that you didn't have before that'll prepare you for something coming down the road.
I think that's like such a good thing, and it's so important, especially like this idea of like cancel culture or woke, all that stuff. Like, I think what kind of made me sad about this, because I remember when I was going to college in the 2000s, we would have Christians, so we'd go out and kind of do campus evangelism. So you would go out and talk with people, and talk to them about Christianity and whatnot. And there are different ways of doing it.
Sure.
Like when I go around in Korea, I see someone on the megaphone like, "You're going to hell! You're going to hell!
Yep.
Jesus will save you!" And I look at that, and my initial reaction is, ugh. But also then I catch myself saying, that's a different methodology. Like I at least respect the fact that they're out here.
Right.
I at least can respect that, because most people, they're just. But my approach has always been, I guess that's just the way I've been built, is like, the way I'm built is I can understand almost any situation. Like a serial killer, I can see how he could become like that. Yeah. His childhood and all that stuff. So I feel like somewhat can sympathize or understand. And so I'm talking to someone, they can be a Satanist, they can be an atheist, they can be Jewish. Like, it doesn't really matter. My goal is simply just to like have a conversation with them, right. And I just want to understand their perspective, because just like doing these like interviews, I think it's really fun. I'm not trying to convince them. I just want to understand what are they thinking and why, and kind of dig in. And so it leads to a lot of conversation. I say, you know what? Thank you so much for sharing your views. My views are different.
Sure.
But I really appreciate that, and I'm glad that we could have a civil conversation. So I remember those experiences, and obviously a lot of experiences were not like that. They were much more confrontational, but that was never my style.
Yeah.
And so now kind of fast forward to these days of like Black Lives Matter, whether it's whatever topic, Republican, MAGA, Trump, whatever it is. I think what kind of makes me sad is that I see more of a wall of, let's say, for example, you like Trump, you're a racist, I cannot associate with you. Yeah. As opposed to saying like, hey, I want to understand where you're coming from. Like, I genuinely just want to understand. And I feel like less of that. And I saw on social media as well, like when you go to the holidays, when you go to Christmas, if your family members are Trump supporters, then don't talk to them. And I'm just like, that sounds very terrible, that you're cutting off this connection. And from what I understand, I think I've heard that academia, there's kind of more of that, of let's say a professor has a different view or students have a different view, they're automatically vilified, as opposed to like, let's have a conversation about it. Let's be an institution where we can sharpen each other and we're all seeking the truth.
Yeah. Wow.
A lot to unpack there, but
it is a lot. And certainly the last several years, as we're seeing this pendulum of politics swing back and forth, but like really abrupt spectrum, like across the spectrum, where we've gone from quote unquote woke culture to a very visceral reaction to it that we've seen in the last election, where things swung back the other way. And we've seen like families and communities divided, and certainly within schools. We've had a number of controversies that are very real problems in the world. That only have to look at the situation in Gaza, and people who have very, very real and tough opinions that are not invalid. There's a pastor who his podcast I listen to every now and again. His name's Erwin Raphael McManus, and I forget the particular issue he was talking about, but he'd been confronted by some Christians, for example, who felt that he wasn't conservative enough on issues around, for example, LGBTQ concerns. And the thing he said was, we need to start from a place where we recognize that the humanity of the other person on the other side of the table, that whatever they're experiencing or whatever their notions are, they are having an experience of the world that is fundamentally human, and it's no less real than my own. What we have become is, as we've started to other one another, and the name calling, and we tend to talk about how someone is like, okay, if you're a Trump supporter or you're woke Antifa or whatever, you're not as enlightened, you're too emotional, you're not a rational thinker. As humans, we're both rational beings and emotional beings. We don't, like, somehow holding one position over the other privileges one particular way the brain works or the other is, I think it's a fallacy. When we can stop and listen to someone else, as you did, and hear another perspective, even if we fundamentally disagree with it, I think it prepares you for the next time you meet with someone else. And I think if you can stop and ask in that conversation, help understand why that person feels that way, we can start to maybe find spaces where we can find common areas to deal with these problems. In academia, it has become really tough because, actually, I'm not even entirely sure all of the reasons why. There are all kinds of pressures for researchers, research pressures, and the politics within institutions. You want to be able to fit in with the community that you're doing work in. For students, your social pressure, the social pressures that are out there. You've got what's going on out in social media and what used to be the blogosphere, and that shaping things. And we've also become so compartmentalized with our communities that we just don't get to see people who are different from us. When you've got, as our institutions have become so expensive to attend, and they've always been expensive to attend, that's nothing new, but there are certain experiences that you have when you can afford to attend a $90,000 institution that someone who can't afford to go to college may never see. And because you can't see where they are, you're not going to be able to know what their pain is, and they're not going to know what your pain points are. They're going to imagine what they might be, but they're not, because we're not sharing that same space. It's hard to fully grasp and understand that. And then we have this incredible ability of human beings to fill in gaps with suppositions that really toxify our perception of that other person. And if we don't find opportunities to occupy those spaces, that toxicity becomes almost like concrete and really hard to break. And we gravitate towards people who think like us and believe like us. And we just started becoming echo chambers where we just bounce the same ideas off of one another, instead of seeing the other person as fundamentally human like myself, who's experiencing a different manifestation of life from me, and I can learn from them. I don't have to agree with them, but I can learn from them. I have family and friends on all ends of the spectrum of politics and faith and culture, and I really try as much as I can to get a sense of like what makes them tick, and asking them, and sometimes it means not talking about politics, but just finding out what are the other pain points in their life, which often do intersect with politics in some way. And it helps me to remember, oh my goodness, they're human like me. They're hurting like me. And I have an obligation to honor that, the dignity of their pain and their suffering, and their perfectly human responses to that pain and suffering, which may not be rational, but they're still human. And also recognize that even my own responses are also often not rational. but I ascribe rationality to them because I could find someone to substantiate that what I believe is true when I may not have the whole picture. I long for a day in our country again where we will have better men. When I say better men or better, like this term better men, I think goes back to probably the post-Enlightenment era, where you were trying with, when the experience of academia, the classical education was to develop a well-rounded man who understood all of these different disciplines. So whether it's science or philosophy or rhetoric or literature or history or mathematics, so that when they entered the public sphere, they could think critically and act competently in these different spaces and know what are the right questions to ask. And know when to just shut up and not jump in and say, we've lost that. And instead, we've gravitated to these folks who kind of please our proclivities, but aren't challenging us to think better of our fellow citizens. In fact, they encourage us to think worse of them. And I would hope that educational environments will recognize that that has been at the core of why we've existed for these, at least in the Western world, for over the last more than that, probably 1,200 years. These environments where, through academic freedom, people are given space to challenge ideas and bring new ideas and discuss and engage in discourse that hopefully makes us all better because we are hearing each other's voices and respecting them. Instead of marginalizing them and shutting them down. I've heard terrible stories, both not just TV, but people like professors who I know who don't feel like they can be themselves in the classroom. Not that, and by being themselves, that means like sometimes offering a little bit of humor, not inappropriate humor, but looking at just the comedy sometimes of human silliness. And one of the things that brings us all together is the ability to laugh and say, ha, that was funny. And when we can no longer do that, and then everything becomes a moment of contention and clashing, it just shuts down dialogue. Then the professor can't be their full self. They are like maybe just regurgitating information. And the students don't see them as a human being either. And that hinders them from possibly being able to develop like meaningful mentoring relationships. Like, hi, wow, I did not know that like you watched this particular TV show. I grew up in this part of the country, and you connect with that person. That simple little connection point can become an opportunity for that person to be someone who can speak truth into your life, who you can offer advice to, and kind of steer you career-wise, that gets shut down because we are so caught in these little echo chambers and are so afraid to be ourselves because we refuse to honor the humanity of each other.
It's like sometimes like I need to understand this world, and I need to understand if you're with me or for me, the othering. And to your point, it's a shame because as soon as I find out that, let's say, I just keep using Trump because that's an easy example, but you're a Trump supporter, then you're not in my tribe. I don't even want to talk to you.
Right.
When in fact, like someone could be watching this from the heavens and be like, no, that person would have helped you with this and helped you with this blind spot and would have helped you grow to get to that next level. And you just said no to him because you threw out the baby with the bathwater.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of that is happening with this is, I don't agree with this one thing. You must be a terrible person. Let's throw this all out. Because it's almost like I have a small view of the world where I think that part of you, that small part of you is your whole. Right. And now I throw you out as a whole.
Yes.
When in fact I have this huge blind spot that is not the whole. That is a part. And if, like that, what that pastor said, the whole is saying this is a human, and me coming from a Christian perspective saying God has created this person. So just by that in itself,
Sure.
I honor that. Whatever they do, whether they're a serial killer, whether they get a Nobel Peace Prize, whatever it is, they start all from the same baseline of
Yes.
they're a valuable human being that is worth, that has an opinion that I need to respect, whether I disagree or not. And so like I think like for those who don't have that awareness, who don't start from that starting point, it's understandable that they try to like compartmentalize and say like that person's a bad person.
Yeah.
And I think about like where do we go from here?
Right.
And I think like one of the steps is just knowing that there is a blind spot. Mm-hmm. Like there's this great book, The Inner Game of Tennis. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Oh, The Inner Game of Tennis. Mm-hmm. So this coach, he's a tennis coach, mm-hmm. and he wrote this book, The Inner Game of Tennis, and he's a good coach, and it just went nuts. It just started selling really well. And the funny thing was, people started contacting him and be like, I'm seeing these same elements in my workplace. And he's like, wait, what? And so then he wrote this book, I think it's called like The Inner Game of Business or something like that. And I read that and it was kind of mind blowing. Wow. So for example, it was kind of the concept of coaching. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to influence someone to change their behavior.
Yes.
Okay, so one of the examples that has stuck with me until now is he says, okay, I'm trying to fix someone's backhand stroke. So I play tennis, backhand stroke. What often happens is if it goes to the net, it starts this negative cycle where I hit it to the net, oh darn, it didn't go well. And it, again, didn't go well. And then you start thinking, my backhand sucks. And so now, when the other person on the opposite side of the court hits the ball and it's going to your backhand, already you're like, oh crap, I knew it's gonna happen. So it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Sure.
And so it's like, how do you fix this? And he's like, stop doing that. And then they start thinking too much about this and then doesn't go. So what he did was super interesting. His observation was, he would tell them, he said, he would almost distract them. So he would say, I don't care where the ball goes after you hit it. I just want you to tell me one thing. When the ball comes to your side of the court, is it rising? Is it going up? Or is it kind of tapering off? And so people are like, okay. He's like, I don't care where the ball goes, just tell me that.
Right.
So they started paying attention to that. And then he's like, what, was the ball going up or was it going down? They're like, it was going up. Okay, cool, next. Going up? It was going down. Okay, cool, next. So he would do this over and over. And what was very interesting is that the person's backhand fixed itself. And this wasn't one time this happened. He tried over many students.
Wow.
And he started figuring out, and his hypothesis was that we all have kind of an inner critic that takes over and says, you're a piece of crap, your backhand sucks, whatever. And so to distract that inner critic, you focus on something else. And so as soon as they started looking at whether the ball is rising, the body just knows how to hit it.
Wow.
And starts getting a lot better. And so I take that and extend that analogy to others, whether it's in sales, academia, wherever. It's like before you try to solve a problem, that by you trying to solve the problem, you may have already deemed yourself to failure.
Right.
So instead of that, you simply want to like notice something.
Yes.
And so one example that we could apply here for, let's say there's a student who doesn't see that blind spot, is it could be something like, hey, I just want you to tell me, like, what is your blind spot? Yeah. And just by that virtual question, it's like, I don't know it's like, what are the spots that I see? What are my blind spots? And just by that in itself, do that. Or when they're about to have a conversation, a contentious conversation, they're like, oh, I'm gonna tell them that Trump supporter, that he's an idiot. You say, like, I just want you to notice. Just tell me, notice. What is their argument? I'm not talking about rationality. It's probably all wrong. Yeah. But I just want you to explain to me what is their stance and what is their reasoning behind it. I just want to know. Yeah. And so it's like almost like this disarming mechanism of just trying to notice it, and then it's like once you have the data, because before the emotions would prevent you from getting the data, but now you can get the data, right? And it's a little bit more objective.
Yeah. I love that example. Like it's so easy to pick up on what we perceive as someone's shortfalls and miss the whole person. And look, we're all guilty of it.
Oh yeah.
And how many times, I can't count how many times I've assumed something about someone who walks in the room because of how they might have been dressed. Like I remember there was this pastor who visited a church I used to go to. I did not know he was a pastor. He had earrings and tattoos and like, oh, this guy's coming in off the street. And he comes up and they've got him on the pulpit.
He's a speaker.
Oh my goodness. And it's, instead of seeing this as another human being who is just a person and waiting to see what I could learn, I was already starting to ascribe certain things onto them. And I felt like such an idiot after that. Like, what would it look like when we encounter people of different political perspectives? And even as they're approaching us, we could find one positive thing in that we can say, oh, that's interesting. Like, it might just even be the shoes that they're wearing. You like their iPhone, I don't know, but something that you could even stop in your head and compliment them for, and it kind of arrests that whole focus on the backhand and gets your mind thinking about something else so that you can focus on the full range of what that person is bringing to the table instead of zeroing in on whatever Trump paraphernalia they may be carrying, or if they are an unabashed Biden-Harris person, or a Democratic, so a Bernie bro or whatever.
And pick the topic, the flavor of the month, any topic.
Or like if we go in the religious context, if they happen to be like some sort of, you don't like right-wing evangelicals or LGBTQ affirming Anglicans or Catholics, can you stop and see something positive about this individual, or something about them that they're doing that they have that you don't have, and be able to celebrate that? And I think that's what Pastor McManus was getting back at. How can we get back to a place where we celebrate each other's humanity?
And I think even if you took at a selfish view, so I think that kind of is a broader view of like, let's celebrate people's humanity. Yeah. Even if you took it from a selfish view, it could actually still fit into this, because as a selfish person, let's just say I'm always wanting to grow. I want to grow my skill sets, I want to grow my knowledges, and there's a certain amount that I can get by looking at the internet, ChatGPT, etc. But there's a certain amount that I have to get through other people.
Yes.
Because why would I go through 10 years of experience when there's someone who already went through it?
Right.
I'll just ask them.
Right.
But in order for me to play the game, to get admission to this party, I have to be able to have a conversation with them.
You do.
And so there's a few different things that are going on. Number one is, as humans, we're very, it's like losses are stronger than gains.
Yeah.
So we have this penchant for negativity. One negative thing I see about them is like 10 times worse than one positive. So plus, we have this whole first impressions is super important. So we know this stuff. Yeah. So we almost have to counterbalance it by, like you said, trying to look for the positive in the person. Because as soon as we find one negative, we're going to have to find 10 more positive things to balance that. But it's like, at the end of the day, though, I am trying to, selfishly, get something from you. This is your life experience and whatever, and I have to get past some of those things.
Yes.
But if I do, I get to get this nugget of gold. And now I get this nugget of gold and nugget of gold and nugget of gold. Or you can just go around the world saying, you're a piece of crap, you're a piece of crap, you're a piece of crap, you are Trump supporter, whatever.
Right.
And so I'll never get those nuggets of gold.
Right. I'm going to sound really corny, but I look at Jesus and the disciples, and here was this man, granted, Jesus is not like anyone else, who's surrounded by these 12 very different people. Like, one guy was like a total radical. Like, the reason why they called Simon the Zealot.
Yes.
The Zealot was not just a category of very eager people. These were like trained assassins. And Jesus brought him into his mix. Another one was a corrupt tax collector. Another group were some filthy fishermen. And then there was one guy who he knew was going to be a traitor from the jump, and he still welcomed. And that's just the 12 that we know of. Never mind all these other folks who he picked up along the way, the women who followed him. And these people came from all these different walks of life. But wherever they came from, he met them in their most human self. Sometimes just doing their jobs, sometimes dealing with sickness, and ask them, like, what do you need right now? Do you want to be well? Didn't care about what their background was or what their pedigrees were, but I'm looking at you as a person and where you are right now, and I'm like creating space to welcome you in. Sometimes they had conflict. But yet he found a way to connect with them on their most human of levels. And he built a community out of it that would eventually become, 2 billion Christians all over the world. And there's a supernatural component to it, absolutely. But I think it's also important to just recognize that this was still a fully human being who was meeting other fully human beings in sometimes their weakest of states, and finding a space to celebrate their dignity and embrace them, even at cost to himself.
I mean, I think that's a great example of just like Jesus, whether viewers believe Jesus is whatever, let's just, for the sake of argument, say he was God, and he's this holy person, meets any human being and they're all sinful. So he's like, oh, I can't associate with you. Right. You're a piece of crap. You're a piece of crap. He could have done, but he did the opposite.
Exactly.
And he's like, I'm going to find something where, either a common point or something where I'm going to see you as a precious human being.
Yes.
And he called like this prostitute, like daughter.
Yes.
Because that person is someone's daughter.
Yes.
But everybody already has labeled them as a piece of crap, a prostitute. Yeah. But he's like, daughter.
Yes.
And it's that humanity that he brings, that connection. He gives that example of like, there's these people who are very different than me. I'm God, you're not. Right. And yet he's like reaching out.
Right.
And that, it's such like it inspired this crazy movement of, billions of Christians. But it's like, what is the kernel of that? Like, why did that happen? Because if that concept or what he did wasn't that great, it would have just died out. There are many, sects and cults and stuff, but why did this last? And I don't know, I feel like he tapped into something like fundamentally the way that we were built, designed as humans, like this need to connect, and also the transformational love when someone reaches out to me, despite me knowing like I'm sinful, I'm a piece of crap, whatever, and yet this person still wants to get to know me. Yeah. Despite all that, I feel like that's very transformational.
Yes. I wonder how that would look like if you were at a networking event. And in the wine and cheese receptions and such, and approaching them as, obviously you're coming there because you want to get something out of it. You're maybe looking for a job or looking for your next step or whatever. You're looking to connect with some important mucky-muck. But in approaching that conversation in the way of Jesus, of seeing that person where they are and like finding a space to invite them in. Like the person who's clearly very shy and awkward and standing up by themselves over at the side of the table. What if you looked, instead of rushing to get to that one person who's got 50 people standing around them, just so that you can get their attention, you actually looked at this as a chance to, maybe that person is standing over by the cheese platter. I'm like, the cheddar wasn't that great tonight. What did you think about it? I'm like, and that's disarming that individual. Or someone who you see came in late and like it was raining outside. I'm like, wow, this weather was it was really hard getting here today, right? Like I got stuck out in the rain, and you find something that reminds that person that they are seen, and seen not for their title, but for who they are. Sometimes it's like now you have to be careful with complimenting people on clothing.
Oh, yeah.
Because that can go sideways really quickly. Yeah. But like I've found, not so much like the shirt or like sometimes it's the tie, sometimes it's like, hey, those shoes are really killer. And I've found those little things can go such a long way to helping someone feel seen in the moment. And then the other stuff can start to ensue, where we can talk about my resume and do the whole elevator pitch and all of that stuff. It's if we focus on opportunities as chances to cultivate, even in a little bit of space, a little bit of humanity and shared humanity, I think it can go a long way to helping to bring down a lot of these walls that we've erected societally, one brick at a time.
That kind of reminds me of recently I was having a conversation about like diversity, equity, and inclusion movements in the workplace, and I think this pendulum swung one end where there's like, let's have quotas, like, oh, you're white, we're not going to hire you. Oh, you're not gay, we're not hiring you. It's just like, I think people started feeling not great about it because it almost felt like a mafia of just like, oh, you're not part of the club, you're out. And we started seeing there were instances, or some of the argument against it is, if I have a pilot, I don't care if they're gay, black, Jewish, I don't care about that. I just care, are they a good pilot and get me to my destination? So there's kind of a space for that. But then, so I feel like the pendulum now is swinging the other way. People just don't like it and they're just like, get rid of it all and blah, blah, blah. But so I think the problem with these like get rid of it all, less nuanced ways of thinking is you throw out the baby with the bathwater. Right. It's like, instead of questioning why did the diversity thing happen in the first place? It's because there is this concept of like equality and equity and, you know, all that stuff. It's like, okay, maybe the implementation wasn't as good, but is the core problem still in existence? Is there still kind of diverse issues where certain groups of people, let's say black, brown people, like they're historically were in a bad spot. So how do you build that up? Now, do you solve it by putting non-qualified people to a certain job and let them become a pilot because of diversity and equity? Probably not a good idea because the passengers wouldn't be happy with that. Right. But how can we solve that? Either through mentorship, additional mentorship, or you go down the path of like, where are their schools? Strengthening their schools so that they can meet the standard. And then the next question is, that standard that we drew, is that truly what is needed? Or is that just a kind of an easy way of we can measure this, test score, or do we actually find that there's other things that we're looking for, which is test score plus their character plus whatever, which I think touches a lot on kind of the earlier things that we talked about. I fear that because things got so crazy so fast, there was a missed opportunity and we lost a lot of people. And in the effort to try to quickly fix stuff, we ended up shutting people out, and now we see the pendulum swinging back the other way. What it should have been was an opportunity for us to, just as you said, look at our systems and examine, is this particular rubric still appropriate? Was it ever appropriate? Where did it come from? Are there things that we're missing that or are there other rubrics that we could employ that would get us ultimately that skilled pilot? I also think that what I think was trying to achieve at some point is to remind people that we are all like a mishmash of a lot of different things, different people, different identities, and different experiences, and to at least acknowledge that those experiences are valid and have been important in shaping who we are. Like some people say, well, I don't want to be put in a particular box.
or the flip side of I don't see color. Like that's ridiculous. Like if you don't, because then we end up in a situation where, Sam, I saw so and so today. Who is that? And then you say, and then I saw George today, and like George who? And then you're like, I'm trying to explain who George is, and then so describe him to me. And I don't even want to acknowledge what George's race is. Like, how unhelpful is that?
He has two eyes.
That's just like stupid. Like those, when you get, that's when it gets to the point where it becomes almost silly. Instead of saying, like, instead of being able to recognize that people are whole people and there are values that can be attached to each person's individual journeys and experiences, but those shouldn't supplant competency. We shouldn't, it's